The sun dipped low over the jagged peaks of Rocky Mountain National Park, painting the sky in streaks of crimson and gold. Jake Harper pulled his ranger jacket tighter against the biting autumn wind, his boots crunching on the gravel path leading to the cliff's edge. He'd been at this job for nearly a decade, but nothing unsettled him quite like the sound that echoed every evening without fail. Sky's scream tore through the stillness, a piercing, mournful cry that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 untold stories. The golden eagle perched on a gnarled pine branch, his scarred wing twitching as he stared down at the abyss below. Jake had found him months ago, tangled in an illegal snare, one amber eye fierce with defiance even as he bled into the snow. He'd nursed the bird back to health, but Sky refused to leave. Every dusk, he came to this same spot and screamed. "Still at it, huh, buddy?" Jake muttered, squinting at the eagle. Sky's head swiveled, fixing him with that unblinking gaze. It wasn't just the sound that got to Jake. It was the way the bird seemed to know something. Something Jake couldn't see. Down in town, folks had started talking. At Maggie's Diner, where the coffee was strong and the gossip stronger, old-timers spun tales of haunted cliffs and lost miners. That eagle's calling for something, Maggie had said the other night, sliding a slice of pecan pie across the counter. "Maybe he's trying to tell you something, Harper." Jake had laughed it off, but the words stuck. He wasn't one for ghost stories. He'd seen enough real trouble in these mountains to believe in spirits. But Sky's cries were different. They felt personal. That evening, as the last light faded, Jake lingered longer than usual. He was about to turn back when he heard a shout, a boy's voice, sharp with panic. "Help!" It came again, faint but unmistakable, from somewhere below the cliff's edge. Jake's heart slammed against his ribs. He knew that voice. Tommy Bennett, the wiry kid who'd been trailing him on patrols all summer, asking too many questions about bears and avalanches. The kid who'd been quieter since his dad shipped out to some base overseas. "Tommy!" Jake yelled, dropping to his knees at the edge. The drop was steep, hundreds of feet down to a rocky basin. His flashlight beam danced across the shale, catching a glint of movement. There, Tommy's red hoodie, clinging to a narrow ledge about 20 feet below. Sky screamed again, wings flaring as he swooped low, circling the spot where Tommy hung. The eagle's cry wasn't just a warning, it was a beacon. Jake's hand shook as he unclipped the rope from his pack, years of training kicking in despite the dread clawing at his chest. He'd lost someone on a cliff like this once before. A hiker, years back. He couldn't lose Tommy too. "Hold on, kid," Jake shouted, securing the rope to a boulder and rappelling down. The wind howled, but Sky's cries cut through it, guiding him like a lifeline. Tommy's face was pale, tear-streaked, his fingers white-knuckled on the rock. "I got you," Jake said, voice steady even as his insides churned. He hooked the harness around the boy and hauled him up, inch by agonizing inch. Back on solid ground, Tommy collapsed against Jake, sobbing into his jacket. I wanted to see what Sky was looking at," he hiccuped. "I slipped." Jake held him tight, his own breath ragged. "You're okay now. But don't you ever pull a stunt like that again, hear me?" Sky landed nearby, his talons clicking on the stone. The eagle tilted his head, as if studying them both, and let out a softer cry, almost like relief. Jake stared at the bird, a chill creeping up his spine. If Sky hadn't screamed, if he hadn't stayed, Tommy wouldn't have made it. "What's down there, Sky?" Jake whispered, more to himself than the eagle. "What are you trying to show me?" The next morning, Jake couldn't shake the image of Tommy's pale face or Sky's piercing cry. He sat at Maggie's Diner, nursing a black coffee, the buzz of early regulars a dull hum in his ears. Tommy was safe at home, grounded for life by his mom, but Jake's gut churned with questions. What had Sky been screaming about all these months? And why that exact spot on the cliff? Maggie slid into the booth across from him, her apron dusted with flour. "Heard about last night," she said, her green eyes sharp with concern. "You okay, Harper? Look like you seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," Jake muttered, staring into his mug. "Just can't figure Sky out." That eagle knew Tommy was in trouble. He led me right to him. Maggie leaned back, crossing her arms. "Animals got instincts we don't. My granddaddy used to say eagles carry messages from the old spirits. Maybe Sky's trying to tell you something bigger." Jake snorted, but the sound lacked conviction. He'd never bought into the old mountain tales. Ghosts of miners lost in avalanches, spirits guarding hidden gold. But Sky's behavior wasn't just instinct. It felt deliberate, like a warning. "I'm heading back up there today," he said finally. "Gotta see what's got him so riled up." Maggie raised an eyebrow. "You sure that's smart? After last night?" "Got no choice," Jake said, tossing a few bills on the table. If Sky's screaming for a reason, I need to know what it is. By noon, Jake was back at the cliff, Sky perched on his usual branch. The eagle's amber eyes tracked him as he unpacked his gear: a longer rope, binoculars, a small pickaxe. The drop below was as treacherous as it had been in the dark, but daylight revealed more. Cracks in the shale, a faint trail of disturbed rock leading to a narrow crevice about 50 feet down. Sky let out a sharp cry as Jake tied off his rope, almost like he was urging him on. "All right, buddy," Jake muttered. "Show me what you're hiding." The descent was slow, the wind tugging at his jacket as he rappelled down. His flashlight caught glints of quartz in the rock, but nothing unusual, until he reached the crevice. It was wider than it looked from above, just big enough for a man to slip inside. And there, wedged in the dirt, was something that made his breath catch: a rusted metal tag, half buried, with faded lettering. He pried it free, brushing off the grime. It read, USFS, Trap 17 to 1982. United States Forest Service. Jake murmured, his frown deepening. The tag was from an old ranger trap, the kind they used decades ago to track wildlife, or catch poachers. But this one had been snapped clean in half, the break jagged and deliberate. Sky screamed again from above, his shadow circling over the cliff. Jake pocketed the tag and swept his light deeper into the crevice. The beam caught something else, a glint of metal, barely visible under a pile of loose shale. He crawled closer, ignoring the scrape of rock against his knees, and brushed the debris aside. It was a small, dented tin box, the kind soldiers used to carry letters or keepsakes. The lid was scratched but intact, with initials carved into it, WR. Jake's pulse quickened. He'd heard stories about a ranger named Wyatt Reynolds who'd disappeared in these mountains back in the 80s. Some said he'd run off with stolen gold. Others swore he'd been killed by poachers. But no one ever found him, or the truth. He pried the box open, the hinges creaking with age. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed and brittle, and a single bullet casing. The paper was a map, hand-drawn, marking this very cliff with a red X. At the bottom, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "They're coming. Hide it." "Who's they?" Jake whispered, his voice swallowed by the wind. He glanced up at Sky, who'd gone silent, wings folded tight. For the first time in months, the eagle wasn't screaming, just watching, as if waiting for Jake to catch up. Back at the ranger station that evening, Jake spread the map across his desk, the tin box sitting like a silent accusation. The red X was unmistakable. This cliff, this crevice. But what was Wyatt hiding? And why had Sky led him straight to it? He didn't hear the door creak open until Tommy's voice broke the silence. "Ranger Jake? I need to tell you something." Jake spun around, startled. The kid looked nervous, clutching a crumpled photo in his hands. "What are you doing here, Tommy? You're supposed to be home." "I know, but—" Tommy hesitated, then held out the photo. It was old, faded, showing a man in a ranger uniform holding a golden eagle chick. "This was my grandpa's. He said he worked here a long time ago. And he told me about a secret on that cliff. Before he died." Jake's blood ran cold. The man in the photo had the same initials on his badge, WR. Jake stared at the photo in Tommy's trembling hands, the faded image of Wyatt Reynolds searing into his mind. The man's grin was wide, proud, as he held the eagle chick, Sky's ancestor. Maybe? The resemblance was uncanny. Tommy shuffled his feet, as darting to the map on Jake's desk. "Grandpa said he saw something he shouldn't have. Up there on the cliff. Never told me what, but he'd get this look, like he was scared, even years later." Jake's throat tightened. He'd grown up hearing the rumors about Wyatt's disappearance, but they were just that, rumors. No proof, no body. Just a ghost story to spook kids around campfires. Now, with the map and the tin box sitting heavy in front of him, it felt all too real. "Why didn't you say something sooner, Tommy?" The boy shrugged, his voice small. "Didn't think it mattered. Till you saved me," and Sky kept screaming. "Grandpa always said eagles don't forget. Maybe Sky remembers too." Jake glanced out the window where Sky perched on the station's flagpole, his silhouette sharp against the moonlit sky. The eagle hadn't cried since Jake found the crevice, but his gaze still burned with that eerie knowing. "Maybe," Jake murmured, folding the map into his pocket. "Go on home, kid. I'll handle this." Tommy hesitated, then nodded, slipping out into the chilly night. Jake waited until the door clicked shut before grabbing his jacket and flashlight. He wasn't waiting for dawn. Whatever Wyatt had hidden, whatever they were after, it was still up there, and Sky knew it. The cliff looked different at night, shadows twisting the familiar rocks into jagged teeth. Jake's boots slipped on loose shale as he climbed back to the crevice, the wind carrying a faint metallic tang. Sky followed, a silent sentinel gliding overhead, his wings catching the moonlight. Jake's flashlight beam danced across the rock walls as he squeezed deeper into the crevice than before, the air growing colder with every step. The map had marked a second spot, a narrow ledge inside the crevice, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Jake's fingers brushed against something smooth, unnatural. He scraped away dirt and found a bundle wrapped in oilcloth, tied with fraying twine. His pulse hammered as he cut it open, revealing a leather journal, its pages swollen with age. The ink was faded but legible, Wyatt's handwriting jagged with urgency. June 12, 1982. Found their camp below the ridge. They've been talking more than pelts, eagle eggs, bear cubs, anything they can sell. Saw their buyer tonight, some city guy in a suit. Threatened me when I got too close. I've got proof now, but they know I'm onto him. If I don't make it, someone's got to stop this. The last entry was dated 2 days later. They're closer. Caught one of their traps, damn near lost my hand. Hid the photos in the tin. If they find me, tell Maggie I'm sorry. Jake's stomach dropped. Maggie? His Maggie? She'd been a kid back then, barely 10 when Wyatt vanished. Her dad had been a ranger too, worked with Wyatt, drank with him at the old tavern. Jake's mind raced, piecing together fragments of half-remembered stories. Maggie had never mentioned Wyatt by name, but she'd always avoided talk of her dad's ranger days. Said it hurt too much. He flipped through the journal, finding a grainy Polaroid tucked between the pages, a blurry shot of 3 men in hunting gear, unloading crates near a fire. One held a rifle. Another clutched what looked like an eagle egg, pale and fragile. The third man's face was obscured, but the suit jacket he wore stood out, sharp, expensive, out of place in the wild. Sky's cry jolted Jake from his thoughts, the sound closer now, echoing inside the crevice. He stuffed the journal into his pack and crawled back toward the entrance, his flashlight catching a fresh scratch in the rock, too clean to be old. Someone had been here. Recently. Back on the cliff's edge, Sky landed beside him, talons scraping stone. The eagle's head tilted toward the forest below, where a faint light flickered through the pines, too steady for a campfire, too hidden for a hiker. Jake's grip tightened on his flashlight. He'd patrolled these trails for years. No one camped this close to the cliffs without a permit. Not unless they didn't want to be found. He should have called it in, waited for backup. But the weight of Wyatt's journal burned in his pack, and Sky's unblinking stare felt like a dare. All right, Jake whispered, starting down the trail. Let's see who's out there. The light led him to a clearing a half-mile down, where a battered pickup sat under a tarp. 2 men stood near it, their voices low but tense. One was older, grizzled, with a scar across his cheek. The other younger, twitchy, holding a rifle. Jake crouched behind a boulder, straining to hear. Can't leave it up there, the older one growled. If someone finds it, we're done. They won't, the younger snapped. Been 40 years. Nobody's looking. Then what's that ranger doing poking around the cliff? The older man shot back. Heard he was up there today. With that damn bird. Jake's blood ran cold. They were talking about him. About Sky. And whatever it was, they were scared he'd find it first. Jake's breath hung in the cold air as he crouched behind the boulder, the men's voices slicing through the night. His hand hovered over the radio clip to his belt, but he didn't dare move, not yet. Sky shifted on a branch above, his talons silent, but his presence a steady weight, like a partner in this unfolding mess. The eagle's amber eyes gleamed, locked on the clearing where the 2 men argued. Doesn't matter what he's looking for, the younger man hissed, adjusting the rifle slung over his shoulder. No one's touched that spot since the old man went down. We made sure of it. The older man spat into the dirt, his scar twisting in the faint glow of their lantern. Wyatt thought he could play hero too. Look where that got him. If this ranger's got half a brain, he'll back off, or he'll end up the same. Jake's jaw clenched. Wyatt. They knew him, knew what happened. The journal in his pack felt heavier now, its pages burning with unanswered questions. He needed to get closer, hear more, but the clearing offered no cover. One wrong step, and he'd be staring down the barrel of that rifle. Sky let out a soft chirr, barely audible, his wings twitching as if sensing Jake's tension. The eagle's gaze flicked toward a narrow game trail snaking around the clearing, a longer route, but hidden by thick underbrush. Jake nodded to himself, trusting the bird's instincts over his own. He crept along the trail, keeping low, the men's voices fading to murmurs as he circled behind the pickup. Up close, the truck looked like it had been through a war, dents in the fender, mud caked on the tires, a cracked windshield. The bed was covered with a tarp, but the corner had come loose, revealing a stack of crates. Jake's flashlight beam caught the edge of one, stenciled with faded lettering, "Live cargo, handle with care." His gut twisted. Poachers. Just like Wyatt had written about. But this wasn't some old grudge. They were still at it, decades later. He edged closer, peeling back the tarp just enough to see inside. The crates were empty, but the stench hit him hard, musky, wild, like trapped animals. A tuft of fur caught his eye, stuck to a splintered board. Bear, maybe. Or wolf. Whatever it wasn't legal. A twig snapped behind him, and Jake froze. The older man's voice cut through the silence, closer now. "Thought I heard something. Check the truck." Panic surged, but Jake forced it down, slipping behind a pine as the younger man's boots crunched toward him. Sky's wings rustled above, a faint distraction, and Jake seized the moment, darting back into the shadows of the trail. His heart pounded as he retreated, the journal thumping against his back with every step. He needed to get to the station, call in the feds. This wasn't just about Wyatt anymore. It was bigger, uglier. By the time Jake reached the ranger station, dawn was breaking, pale light spilling over the mountains. Sky had followed, landing on the roof with a soft thud, his cries replaced by an eerie stillness. Jake locked the door behind him and spread the journal out, flipping to the last entry again. "They're coming. Hide it." What had Wyatt hidden? And where? His radio crackled before he could think too long. "Harper? You there?" It was Maggie, her voice tight with worry. "Got a problem down at the diner. Some guy's asking questions about you, and that Cliff." Jake's grip tightened on the receiver. "What kind of guy?" "Rough type. Scar on his face. Says he's a hiker, but he don't look the part. Asked if you've been poking around up there lately." The older man from the clearing. Jake's blood ran cold. "Maggie, listen to me. Don't tell him nothing. Close up early, go home, lock your doors. I'll handle it." "Jake, what's going on?" Her voice trembled, but he could hear the steel in it too, the same stubborn streak that had kept her diner running through blizzards and broke seasons. "I'll explain later," he said, already grabbing his pack. "Just stay safe." He hung up before she could argue, his mind racing. The poachers knew he was onto them, and they weren't wasting time. But they didn't know how much he'd found or what Sky had led him to. He glanced at the eagle through the window, the bird's scarred wing catching the first rays of sun. "You knew, didn't you?" Jake muttered. "All this time." The journal mentioned photos proof Wyatt had hidden in the tin box. But the tin Jake found only had the map and a bullet casing. There had to be more. He studied the map again, tracing the red X, then noticed a faint line branching off to another spot, a cave, maybe, higher up the cliff face. It was a long shot, but Sky had been screaming at that cliff for months. If anything was still there, it'd be in that cave. Jake didn't wait for backup. He couldn't, not with Maggie in danger and those men closing in. He drove back to the trailhead, Sky soaring overhead, and hiked to the cliff faster than he ever had. The cave was higher than he'd thought, a jagged slit in the rock barely visible from below. He rappelled up, his arms burning, until he could crawl inside. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of moss. His flashlight swept the walls, and there it was, tucked into a crack. Another tin, this one smaller, sealed tight. Inside were a dozen Polaroids, each one showing the same men from the journal's photo, but clearer now. Crates of eagle eggs, bear pelts, wolf pups. And a note, scrawled in Wyatt's hand. For Maggie's dad. "Don't let him win." Jake's hand shook as he stuffed the photos into his pack. This was it, the proof Wyatt died for. And now, it was Jake's turn to finish what he started. Jake clutched the tin of Polaroids, his breath ragged in the cave's damp chill. The images burned into his mind, eagle eggs, bear pelts, faces of men who'd taken more than the mountains could give. Wyatt's note echoed in his head. Don't let him win. He wouldn't. Not after all this. Sky's soft chirr outside pulled him back to the moment. The eagle perched at the cave's mouth, wings folded, as if he'd been waiting for this all along. The descent was quicker, fueled by adrenaline. Jake hit the trail running, the photos safe in his pack, Sky soaring above like a guardian. He needed to get to the station, call the feds, end this before those men came for him, or Maggie. But as he neared the trailhead, headlights cut through the early morning haze. The battered pickup from the clearing idled at the lot's edge, the older man with the scar leaning against the hood, a shotgun resting on his shoulder. "Ranger," the man called, his voice gravelly, "you've been busy." Jake slowed, his hand brushing the radio on his belt. "No signal this far out. You'd have to talk his way through." "Just doing my job," he said, keeping his tone even. "Patrolling." "You." The man smirked, the scar twisting his face into a snarl. "Funny thing about jobs. Sometimes they get you in over your head. Like your buddy Wyatt. Should have stayed out of our business." Sky screeched from above, diving low over the man's head. The distraction was enough. Jake lunged behind a boulder as the man swung the shotgun up, cursing. A shot rang out, splintering bark, but Jake was already moving, circling through the pines. He wasn't a fighter, not really, but these mountains were his. He knew every trail, every hollow. The younger man appeared from the trees, rifle raised, but Sky struck again, talons raking across his arm. The kid yelped, dropping the weapon, and Jake seized the chance, tackling him into the dirt. A quick punch to the jaw knocked him out cold. One down. The older man was smarter, staying near the truck, sweeping the clearing with his shotgun. "You can't run forever, Ranger," he shouted. "Hand over what you found, and maybe you walk away." Jake didn't answer. He crept closer, using the dawn shadows, Sky's cries guiding him like a map. The eagle landed on the truck's roof, drawing the man's eye for a split second, just long enough for Jake to rush him. They hit the ground hard, the shotgun skidding away. The man was strong, stronger than Jake expected, but grief and guilt fueled Jake's fists. He thought of Wyatt, of Tommy on that ledge, of every creature these men had stolen from the wild. One solid hit to the temple, and the man went limp. By the time the feds arrived, Jake had both men tied up with climbing rope, the Polaroids spread out on the hood of their truck. The agents confirmed what Jake suspected. The men were part of a poaching ring that had operated in the Rockies for decades, splintered but never broken since Wyatt's time. The photos tied them to crimes stretching back to the 80s, enough for a lifetime behind bars. Maggie met him at the station later, her diner apron swapped for a flannel coat, eyes red but steady. "Found an old letter from Wyatt in Dad's things," she said, handing him a faded envelope. "He wrote it the day before he disappeared. Said he was sorry for dragging Dad into it, but someone had to stop him. Guess you finished what they started." Jake nodded, throat tight. Wyatt didn't die for nothing. They buried a small marker for Wyatt near the cliff that evening, just a stone with his initials. Sky perched nearby, silent for the first time in months, his scarred wing catching the last light. Tommy was there too, clutching the old photo of his grandpa, a quiet pride in his eyes. Weeks later, Jake sat on his porch, Sky's new aviary casting a long shadow across the yard. The eagle hadn't left, even after the arrests, but his cries had softened, more a song than a warning. Jake sipped his coffee, watching the mountains glow under a blanket of snow, and thought about what Tommy had said. Eagles don't forget. Neither did the wild, he figured. It held its secrets close, but it always found a way to speak, through a scream, a photo, a boy's foolish courage. Maybe that was the real lesson here. The past doesn't stay buried, not when there's something worth fighting for. Jake scratched Sky's name into the aviary's post, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Thanks, buddy," he murmured. "Couldn't have done it without you." Sky tilted his head, amber eyes glinting, and let out a single, clear note, a sound like peace, carried on the wind.